Next up this week, we're back on the housing desk if we can find a place big enough to fit one next to the kitchen sink. The whole country agrees that we need to build more houses somehow, somewhere, but nobody agrees on where, how many, or how it's going to be paid for. England alone needs 340,000 new homes a year, including 145,000 affordable homes. That's every year until 2031, just to keep up with current demand, according to the National Housing Federation. Yet existing house prices are at the lowest rate in half a decade and are predicted to fall still further by 2025. So assuming that Labour are on track for the kind of majority where they can actually get stuff done, how would all this stuff get fixed? Hannah, you are housing desk. The problem is enormous and yet weirdly, seemingly simple. Not enough houses, too many people. Can you break it down in a bit more detail? Where and what sorts of houses are missing?
I'll try and help. So, first of all, there's sort of two sides to the what's missing. It's, who owns it and where do you get it from, and also what does it do? So, we obviously do not have enough social rented housing. It was all sold off through the right to buy. We didn't rebuild enough. But we also created under Cameron this false thing called affordable rent, which comes under the social housing criteria, but it's actually not affordable at all. It's about 80% of market rent, which is inaffordable to most people. So it's not useful. So there's a huge gap there. We don't have enough private rent that is properly organised through corporate private landlords. There was a good attempt at this to bring in some legislation to make this happen. Under late years of Blair and then Cameron, these things called real estate investment trust, REITs, they were designed to make sure that it wasn't just random hobbyists who were your private landlord. It would be big institutions, and pension funds would own these big developments, and it would mean that you could have secure long-term private rent. We don't have enough of that. We also don't have enough specialist housing. So if you're disabled or you become disabled, you can stay in your own home. On one level, you think about bungalows for pensioners, but there's a whole range of needs that need to be reflected in housing that we just don't have enough of. And we also don't have enough basic large family homes because people are sitting in their private owned home that they've paid the mortgage off in when there's maybe only one of a former family of five left because everybody's died or moved out, and but they're just completely under occupying them. So they're sitting there and I hate to use this term because it is a bit crass, but it's sort of bed blocking them. So you can't. So families can't get in, and it is, it's complex, but it is, as you say, sort of simple. We do need more numbers, and we need it to make it more affordable and accessible. And obviously, supply is part of the affordability question, but it's not the whole element. Yeah. I could talk for about 20 minutes straight, so I'll let you ask another question.
Well, I'm sure we'll come back to this, possibly on Bunker Dailies as well, because it is massively complicated. And I mean, housing policy itself is famously hard to communicate anyway because it's so variegated. Labour plans include more building on the Greenbelt, bringing back the housing targets that the Conservatives scrapped last year, making it cheaper to buy agricultural land for development, and what they call tilting the power in favour of first-time buyers. What does all this amount to? What is your thought as a housing person on the Labour package? Yeah.
Well, it is hard to communicate. You're right to say that because it is kind of complex. There's so many players involved, and the money strand is all caught up in lots of different places. And also because I think people who have paid off their mortgage in modern Britain, which is the majority of people who own their home, by the way, just don't know what it is to be homeless in modern Britain. They have no tangible feeling about what that might be like, and the bidding wars for rent and so on, and how hard it is to survive on universal credit if you need housing benefit. So Labour policy, as you said, all those elements that you pointed out, it's got all of the right things in there, but they are actually also all the same things that all parties have dabbled in a bit. There's actually nothing completely radical in it. And I think I would like to see something a bit more radical because the funding and the commitment is the problem. So you can say you're going to do all these little bits of things, make commitments, but you've got to actually see it through to the end. And relying on the private sector right now, which Tories would obviously do, to deliver a lot of this is just not going to happen. We've got an economy where house prices are dropping, materials are incredibly expensive, labour's incredibly expensive. It's not a economically sensible proposition to be a house builder right now. So they're not going to jump in and want to be doing this.
So if you were given the remote control to Rachel Reeves's brain, and you can do these radical things, what would they be?
Right, I've got a list of 4 things.
Excellent, 4 points. Tony Blair would love that.
Rachel Reeves, are you listening? Mm-hmm. I'm very happy to come and do a little bit of consulting on the side.
Okay.
Number 1 is to set up a development corporation with a target and fully fund it in some way. It's fine if you get private investment in somehow. I have no problem with that politically, but you need the government to be responsible, and setting up a development corporation to deliver the housing that we need is the only way to do that. Because then you can be really prescriptive on the numbers of social housing, the numbers of other types of housing. And I do understand all the arguments against centralisation. Yeah, and even Labour have said they want local authorities to have more control. But this is a human right. It's beyond now a debate about the politics of localisation versus centralisation. You've got to get it sorted. And it's happened before. The new towns were set up using development corporations. So there is a history of it. So I think that would be really good. So it would be government control, but expert run, and they would have to meet these targets.
You call it Great British Housing.
Great British Housing.
That's
I
a
actually
great
have
acronym.
no problem with that.
What a great acronym that is.
Brilliant.